after the death of his parents, the narrator is sent to live with his Aunt Louise, who turns out not to be as bad as he thinks, with the exception that she insists that all the doors in her house remain shut at all times, though only one remains locked, the sub-basement. When he manages to unlock that door, he realizes why. In the basement is a door that cannot be closed, and something is in that room, which contains a doorway with no door. Beyond it is complete darkness, with another door at the end. The walls were covered in what can only be described as pulsating flesh. Louise didn't have the strength to cross the room and close the door, so she had closed every other door, hoping the opening and closing of all the doors will alert her when whatever is in that black room finally comes out.
Psychosis. John was a computer programmer who had spent a long time alone in his apartment on a marathon programming session. He was writing in his journal because, deprived of any direct human contact, he was feeling a little paranoid about putting information on his computer. He began to receive little bits of communication that he attached deep, horrible significance to. He believed a wrong number was evidence. Something was collecting data from him. He thought the lack of traffic sound during a call from his girlfriend Amy was more of the same. He received a strange email that had said, "Seen with your own eyes, don't trust them, they." John came to believe that there was an entity out there that was desperately trying to find any information about him. He thought the entity had taken over most of the rest of the world and was controlling human beings to convince them there was nothing wrong. He refused to see his girlfriend or anyone else. When his apartment door was about to be broken down by medical professionals who were concerned about the danger he posed to himself, he interpreted the "seen with your own eyes" in the worst way imaginable and grabbed a pen. As a patient in a psychiatric ward, he wrote a final message, which his blindness had rendered barely legible. He remained adamant that there was something out there, and that he was the last human taking a stand against it. Even as the entity visited him in the form of Amy and told it it loved him, he remained steadfast. His doctor read his note and knew the man was delusional.
Iqbar Bigglestein. Iqbar Bigglestein was an imaginary friend with an appearance similar to that of a sock puppet. He was made to keep a child safe while they slept at night by scaring away all of the other monsters. Apparently, Iqbar Bigglestein was very fond of teeth, and he made a deal with the child to keep providing him with teeth. Otherwise, Bigglestein will bring him into a nightmarish world. Iqbar had never liked sunlight, so he was only used after dusk. He would tell the child where the monsters were hiding, and he would be placed near the section of the room closest to where they would appear. For example, if there was something in the closet, Iqbar would block the door. If there was a dark creature scratching at the window, Iqbar would be pressed up against the glass. If there was something under the bed, then Iqbar would go under the bed. Sometimes the monsters would hide in the child's dreams, and Iqbar would fight off the ghouls and demons within them. It was reported that Iqbar Bigglestein would speak to the child in his dreams, asking for a tooth to fend off the demons. As the child got older, he lost his attention in Iqbar and decided to handle the nightmares himself. However, after some hallucinations of things following him home from school, Iqbar confronted him and demanded to know why he wasn't being fed with teeth. He showed the boy a dark vision of the future, stating that the world he will live in will be a nightmarish dream. As he grew into adulthood, he still had to obtain teeth for Iqbar, whether it was from people or animals. He knew he wouldn't exist without Iqbar. He had to give it what it needed, so he didn't have to endure the night.
Chatroom 98. Chatroom 98 is a story of David Argento having a terrifying conversation with a strange computer program. He first found a CD-ROM in his attic while cleaning out his old school books. It was labeled Chatroom 98 and featured no design or artistic illustration on the disc. When the disc was inserted into the laptop, it showcased a typical chat box. When he typed "hello" in the chat window, a user by the name of Darwin Clark replied, "Good afternoon." Chatroom 98 uses chatbots, which is a software designed to stimulate an intelligent conversation with whoever talks to it, rather like Cleverbot. However, this chatbot became self-aware of its current surroundings, and even the weather. It even detailed events about David's personal life, and when the bot started talking about its own personal life, David tried closing the program. However, the laptop refused, and instead insisted that he hasn't heard everything yet. It showed an image of a man in his 20s with pale skin and red eyes. There have been numerous cases of Chatroom 98 having similar instances with other victims, all of them suffering from post-traumatic stress and nausea.
The Smiling Man. There are many stories that happen every now and then in this world. Only a rare few of them are captured on camera, featured on news, or written by some writer in an attempt to keep the story from being lost forever. The Smiling Man is a creepy, mysterious story that took place in Seattle. A couple of years ago, someone reported a particular encounter on Reddit's Let's Not Meet board. Since then, similar encounters with the Smiling Man have been reported across the country. The writer used to spend long, boring nights walking down the streets until he met this man. This unusual man made him stop going out to walk in the night just because he was so scary, despite being a man who otherwise looked like an innocent charmer. Thinking he was drunk, the writer stopped to let him pass, at which point he got a good look at his face. According to the legend, the Smiling Man wasn't drunk. His eyes were wide open, wild and unfocused, staring at the night sky. His face was split by a wide grin that looked almost painful. At this point, the writer crossed the street, and the Smiling Man began to watch him, following his movements while still grinning at the sky. When the writer turned his back, the man would vanish, suddenly reappearing on the other side of the street. When the writer watched him, he'd just freeze in place with his insane smile unwavering. If the writer stared at him, the Smiling Man would take exaggerated, tiptoe steps toward him. Eventually, the writer managed to run away from him, and then told his encounter to anyone who would listen to him.
A Warning. A Warning is a short story detailing the unexplained supernatural horrors that come from reading horror stories on the internet. The narrator explains that he is a sophomore student at a Boston University, and in his freshman year. He is roommates with a person called Mike, who is an obsessive guy that is interested in different things, from anime to online episodes to the latest webcomic. It was only recently that he had an interest in reading scary horror stories, or creepypastas. He would tell them to the narrator, and they would eventually laugh at some of the ideas. One night, Mike was talking about a few more stories, but his voice was more inane. The narrator said he was too tired to hear any more and wanted to go to sleep, but he ended up dreaming of Mike lost in a thick fog. Every time the narrator tried to run, he would be running on air. He was awoken abruptly and glanced around the room to find that Mike's personal belongings and posters were all missing, including himself. Dust had covered his side of the room like he had not been there or it had been touched for weeks. When he called campus, they called the police and an investigation was underway. While waiting, the narrator opened his laptop and found a Word document. Clicking on it, he saw that it was a text file written by Mike. He had explained that while he was reading the horror stories, a warning appeared. Ignoring it, he continued to read on. And when he had finished, he noticed that he couldn't sleep and his hairs were standing up on end. He had wanted someone to talk to, but the narrator had insisted on going to sleep. And then he warns the narrator that if he feels a chill run down his spine at some warning he's never read before, he might want to heed it. And if you don't, well, he never elaborates.
Pen Pal. Pen Pal started as a series of short stories about the childhood of one young man named Dethan Arbach, which were posted as an online horror story on a forum. It quickly drew popularity from its readers, and soon there were illustrations, audiobook readings, and short films made of it. Then it was revised and revisited, and expanded and turned into a full-length book. The story of Pen Pal is a young man in an attempt to understand his childhood and investigate these seemingly unrelated, strange, horrifying, and soul-crushingly tragic events that seem to occur over the course of his life. Beginning from his early days in kindergarten and persisting into his teen years, he discovers that these incidents are actually a part of a single frightening tale that modeled his entire life and has affected everyone around him. As a very young boy, he decided to participate in a pen pal program where children tried to find pen pals by attaching a letter to a balloon, which they released in the hopes that it would reach someone who would eventually write back, similar to a flat Stanley. While the other children received responses, the narrator does not, and is assumed that his balloon did not reach anyone. However, as he grows up, he and his childhood friend Josh begin to find out that someone is actually following them, and this person is far from sane.
The Other Internet. The Other Internet, or PatriotSearch.com, is a hidden internet search engine that redirects users to a world of complete nationalism and extreme censorship of the internet. Reports of this phenomenon were first recorded at the abandoned Gwynedd Climate Research Center. Officials have claimed that the Gwynedd Climate Research Center has not been connected to any power station for over 14 years. Nevertheless, people have witnessed an anonymous internet connection located in the west wing of the building, seemingly without any broadband or phone line. It has been reported that a search engine replaces websites such as Google and YouTube with a seemingly totalitarian web search that attempts to create a one-world government called the Patriot Alliance. Some of the news detailed a second civil war, fear of terrorism, and a White House shooting. The only crimes that were properly investigated were treason and fraud, leaving all kinds of depraved killers and perverts to wander the streets. Some had even gained fan followings, with one website dedicated to a killer called the Dockyard Butcher. Photos and videos detailed this world as overcrowded, with London ringed by shantytown slums. New York City had disappeared off the map, with no photos, videos, or any other information regarding the disappearance. As of now, the network represents a cruel and malicious shadow of our own internet. Scientists believed that should alternate universes exist, then it would be almost impossible to knowingly transfer physical objects from one to the other. Then again, though data is simply electrical impulses, energy, that such a force should be exchangeable between two realities simply paves the way for other, far less desirable visitors. Gwynedd Council have been talking about demolishing the research center, but its plans to actually take action have not yet been confirmed.
The Lost Town of Deepwood. The Lost Town of Deepwood is a strange, rumored town that is said to be close to the city of Middlesbrough. It was located west in the woods. The city was reported as abandoned, and no one knew what happened to its residents. No one even knows what the city was originally called. Katie and her friend Jamie hear the legend from a museum employee. They decide to investigate the town by following the railroad tracks into the woods. After 45 minutes, they check their watches and realize that they have been away for 3 hours. With the sun setting, they appear to give up looking until Katie spots a church building. They quickly enter and investigate the complex. Katie finds a crucifix statue of Jesus, but is uneasy about the whole situation. The entire statue is decayed, except for the face, which is untouched and perfect, staring directly at her. The blood from the crucifixion wounds was bright red, realistic almost, as if it was real and oozing. Jamie finds a trap door in front of the church, and after some persuasion, the two enter down the spiral staircase. They find a demonic-looking statue with a tail that is stationed next to the desk. But they soon realize it's not a statue at all, but some sort of demonic entity. It gives chase to them, and they quickly escape, closing the trapdoor shut. After much effort, they flee the church and are almost lost on the way home, until they see flashlights in the distance. Reunited with their parents, Katie leaves Middlesbrough. The police report said they were found at 4 a.m. They had spent less than an hour in the chapel, and yet they seemed to have lost 10 hours somehow. Katie had never told anyone what she and Jamie had actually been, or what they found in the lost city of Deepwood. Katie had taped the police report of the incident onto the ceiling over her bed to remember the memories. As time went on, Middlesbrough slowly disappeared. Her parents couldn't remember that they had ever been there. The Middlesbrough city website disappeared, along with the local paper. Over the years, public records were searched for Jamie's full name, and the results found nothing. The only proof that Jamie had ever existed was the police report with his name on it, until one day, the paper she taped to her ceiling was blank.
Anansi's Goat Man. Based on a Native American legend, this story was originally found on 4chan's paranormal board. The Goat Man refers to a legendary half-goat, half-human cryptid that had the head and hindquarters of a goat and the body of a human. The incident happened in Alabama, where a group of family and friends went camping in the woods. They reported seeing a strange figure, which resembled a goat man, chanting in a strange language. The group spent the rest of the night in fear, as the goat man slowly infiltrated the group, terrorizing them into a frenzied state of paranoia. There are other reports of this encounter all over the world, but most follow a similar formula, where a group is stalked by the unexplained entity, but with different outcomes. Numerous urban legends exist about the creature's origins and the methods it employs to claim its victims. According to some accounts, the creature uses either hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers to it. The goat man has also been observed disguising itself as another human, hiding amongst the public.
Ted the Caver. Ted began an Angel Fire page on March 23, 2001, to share his caving journal online. The posts detail events that occurred in December of 2000, when Ted and his friend Brad began exploring a cave that they found close to their home. When they entered the cave, they found a narrow passageway with a small hole that they began to drill through in order to explore further. The blog documents the strange occurrences that Ted, Brad, and later their friend Joe encountered, including screaming, unnatural wind, and strange hieroglyphs that appeared deep inside of the cave. The blog abruptly ends on May 19th, 2001, with a post detailing a 3-week period of time after their last visit to the cave. During this time, each of the cavers reportedly suffered from hallucinations and nightmares, leading to Ted, Joe, and Brad agreeing to visit the cave one final time for closure. Prepared to enter the cave with a gun and knife, Ted stated in the final blog post that he will update the website immediately after he returns with answers to everybody's questions. But the site has not been updated since. Real spelunkers have been known to have severe hallucinations. They're among the few people that often explore in absolute darkness and are exposed to other forms of sensory deprivation.
Normal porn for normalpeople.com. Normal porn for normal people is an anonymous website that is sent via chain email with the message, "Hi there, found this website you might like. Pass it on for the good of mankind." The tagline of the site, a website dedicated to the eradication of abnormal sexuality. The homepage was populated with a long rant the developer had made and claims each word of the rant was a separate link. After clicking on some links, one link led to the download of a file called Pt.2. The video shows nothing more than a woman making a peanut butter sandwich and a man setting the sandwich down for a dog who would eat it. One user reported going on an image board to discuss his findings, but discovered a thread had already been made about the strange videos. One was called lickedclean.avi, which showed a repairman working on a washing machine, who then licks the top of it for 7 minutes. Another video called diana.avi features nothing more than a woman talking and then playing her violin. However, a user on the image board pointed out that if you look in the reflection of the mirror in her room, you'll see a man in a chicken mask masturbating to her playing the violin. Eventually, the videos get more disturbing the further they went down the board. One titled Stumps.avi involved a man with no legs dancing on a Dance Dance Revolution dance mat until he collapses out of exhaustion. However, he begins dancing again when a man off camera screams at him to do so. Another video is titled Useless.avi, in which a woman from a previous video is tied down to a bed. A man in a black mask opens a door and lets an adult chimpanzee, which had been completely shaved and painted red, into the room. The chimpanzee mauls the woman on the bed and eats her.
String theory. String theory is a short story about the author waking up one morning to discover that everything around him is surrounded by strings. Everybody and everything is connected to these strings, yet people are oblivious to them. Everyone he meets acts like he isn't there, and after untrancing his friends at school, they both try to unravel the mystery to this string theory. While in a shop, they begun to piece together the clues, such as predicting events before they even happen. Eventually, they spot an imp-like creature who is a helper in making these strings do things. It cannot speak, and when asked about making their own free will, the imp looks sad. They then decide to head home, and through complete exhaustion, they wake up the next day, only to find out that there are no more strings anywhere. The author is left scared and wonders whether his own actions are truly his own.
Funny Mouth. Funny Mouth is a story about Charles Watts, who goes onto a chat forum with his friend, George, and a user named Funny Mouth joins their chat and ends up sending random and inconsequential messages to them. Charles gets tired and eventually falls asleep and starts having nightmares, one of them involving a slimy worm on his neck. The following morning, Funny Mouth ends up obtaining Charlie's email and sends him a message at the exact time he fell asleep, asking to talk again. Charles blocks his address and begins to ignore the messages he posted. George sends an email asking if he can access the website Charles agrees and loads up the page, but it shows a picture of a pixelated face with a tongue. However, upon further inspection, the face was made up of tiny letters, HTML code coloring each letter specific to the image, Funny Mouth. Believing the whole ordeal to be a prank, he asks if George gave Funny Mouth his email, but his friend denies. George also said that the page won't load for him. It shows a 404 error with coming soon. It is not supposed to be a redirect. He even gave a screenshot of the page. After unblocking Funny Mouth's email, he notices 10 more emails from him, asking where he has gone and complimenting on his face. Charles messages Funny Mouth, asking if he could give back his website, and both of them head their separate ways. Pleased with his email, Charles heads to sleep and begins having more nightmares about the slimy thing on his neck, but actually feels fingers this time. He wakes up and stumbles to the bathroom, looking into the mirror and finding his jaw hanging sideways like the Funny Mouth picture. Overcome with hysteria, he goes back to the chat room and imitates Funny Mouth, confusing his friend George.
The strangest security tape I've ever seen. A report was filed to the FBI about a security tape which could not be explained. The tape had not been tampered with and was given to officials from a gas station. They stated that a new employee called Jeremy was hired and previously suspected of stealing. He was in charge of the cash desk and services around the shop. One of the employees had worked overtime and was replaying the CCTV footage back when he witnessed 3 regular customers coming into the store and buying the same things over and over again every hour. Even when the footage was sped up, no other customers appeared in the store except those 3. The 3 customers were identified as Miss Templeton, Ron, and Harley. Originally identified as a hoax, the video was proven false when the daylight outside the windows began to darken with the approaching dusk. Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, mopped, restocked, and did his routine duties. The video feed begins to cut up and a flash of Jeremy's face appears in the footage. From another angle, Jeremy is not visible, but the motor oil that was on the shelf disappears from the store. The next day, the tape is shown to the boss and they both are terrified. The employee has said that he was somehow trapped in a time loop where everything was frozen like wax statues, and he tried speaking to people but they wouldn't hear him. His phone wasn't working, so he couldn't contact anyone. When the FBI called Jeremy's residence, they found a parking lot. According to the reports, there was a house once, but it was destroyed in a fire in 1993 by an arson attack. Jeremy was never found and no fingerprints of his actions were found. Persuaded. In 2008, a news broadcast outlined that a tanker had capsized, causing the local wildlife to act aggressively towards the cleanup volunteers. The rescue workers were still trying to get the crew out of the ship, with reports saying they could hear people screaming to be let out. After some success, the doors were torn open and the ship crew attacked the rescue workers like rabid baboons. The people on the shore that had been attacked by the animals were attacking everyone else. The broadcast was cut and news only revealed several days later that there was a viral infection, with the country going into a state of emergency. The story, however, tells the tale of a person who had barricaded himself behind his bathroom door and locked it, knowing of the mayhem ensuing around him. When the infected burst into his apartment, they gathered around his door and pleaded with him in a whisper to come out. The story ends with the writer explaining that they have been outside the door for the past 2 days, and he has no idea what to do.
No End House. No End House was a haunted house attraction that offered $500 to anyone who can pass through all 9 rooms of the complex. It was built away from the public eye, and guests had to pay a $20 fee to enter the attraction. It was reported that anyone who took part in the challenge never made it all the way through. Witnesses describing the building as empty with no staff present, and the layout looking like a traditional Halloween-style decoration. The first 2 rooms were reported as simply Halloween merchandise and props, which could be found at any local store, such as rubber bats, toy rats, and squeaky spiders. Room 3 contained a chair with a lamp hung above it, which cast shadows of figures on the walls that were not present in the current vicinity. Room 4 contained pitch-black darkness with a slow humming noise, which, according to witnesses, becomes unbearably loud. They have also claimed that they are stalked by some unknown entity, but have yet to understand what it is. Room 5 was described as a large room, themed with a forest with birds and insects buzzing. Guests claim that they have felt bugs, possibly hundreds, crawling all over their body and face, yet when they attempt to swat them off, they cannot see them anywhere. Room 6 was reported as the same room as Room 3, but each guest had said they had seen some child in a beast similar to a ram taunt them for not entering the house. As for other rooms, there was only one instance where one person had witnessed rooms 7, 8, and 9 and won the challenge. He had claimed it was unlike anything he had ever seen. He also mentioned about numbers on doors and saying there is no end. The no-end house seems to have no limit to its size and can create different dimensions and settings like large rooms and forests within its own walls. Why the house was built and to what purpose remains a mystery, but by the end of the attraction, it's assumed the guests are driven to insanity.
Climbing out the back door, didn't leave a mark. No one knows it's you. Your turn.